welcome Andy Chakravarti, Chief Growth Officer from Omnicom. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about a very important topic, diversity, equity and inclusion, and just like how B2B marketing organisations, what we're seeing in the region, and just generally like the trends that you're observing from an agency perspective as you work with a lot of clients and brands across kind of like your activities. So just kind of like a little bit of like insight that we sort of like have picked up from one of our recent reports. We've seen that many B2B organisations claim to have made major strides since 2020. And there was a lot of excitement and sort of a lot of energy and momentum in terms of driving those programmes forward. But in a recent report, B2B marketing benchmark report indicates that like kind of excitement or sort of, kind of drive behind those programs seems to have fizzled out. So I guess the question I was having was like, from your perspective and, from the agency perspective, do you have any kind of insight as to what might be driving that?
Well, you're right. I think it's unfortunate that, yes, I think it has lost steam. I wouldn't say everywhere, and I think that would be incorrect to say. I think there are a lot of companies, both multinational companies in India and very large Indian companies who have put in not just the resources and people, but I think there is top leadership, which is also very, very focused on it. And therefore, hopefully, we are starting to see the spotlight continuing to be shined on the space. But by and large, if you look at the larger ecosystem of companies, you're right. I think, I wouldn't say it's lip service, but I just think it's a lack of being able to put in the resources and the effort behind it, right? Look, India is a growth market. We're growing at a very, very fast pace. And the truth is that many of the large to mid-sized companies have challenging targets to meet. So eventually, if it's a choice of where do you put resources, I think, unfortunately, the stock market and the board will focus on areas that are currently pertinent and important.
Yeah.
Not to say that DEI is not, but I think we are seeing that, I wouldn't call it lip service, but I don't think there's enough being done around it by far.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, yes, you're right. There is a trend where a lot of conversations have happened around it, but I don't think we are seeing people put their money where their mouth is.
But do you think the business case is there at a kind of a senior leadership level?
Yeah. Look, I've always firmly believed that when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion, I think, and I know that a lot of my peers in the industry also believe it, it's about, hiring people who are capable. It doesn't matter what orientation they have, which background they come from. Look at the Omnicom group in India, for example. We have two agencies, PhD and OMD. Both are led by extremely capable women CEOs, right? The best in the industry. And I think they've done a fantastic job in turning around both the agencies to what they are today. And below them, they have very, very senior women leadership also who have grown and, occupy really important places. So I think it is happening. I think we are seeing that in the agency ecosystem. In fact, if you look at the overall agency ecosystem in India, you will find a lot of women leadership across the board. So I think in the agency side, it's happened. I think if you look at on the client side, I think there are pockets where it's certainly very, very visible. I think from a hiring perspective, a lot of companies now have, I won't say diktats, but have policies in place to ensure that certain positions you will evaluate more candidates, including more women or people from different backgrounds to ensure that, there's a fair chance given to people from diverse background. I think there is also a policy where a certain amount of senior level leadership should be represented by women.
Yeah.
Like, for example, let's look at boards, the composition of boards in this country, still very, very male skewed. Hopefully that is changing. And we're seeing some larger things also happening. We talked about this, right? For example, in India, a law was passed in the parliament a couple of weeks back where now 30% of seats are going to be reserved for women. Now, one could choose to be skeptical about the fact that it's politicians taking this call, but I think it sends a larger signal out there, and it's good. It's good, right? In fact, just day before yesterday, we saw one of the marketing and digital marketing associations in India also ensure that their membership would now have a certain number of minimum membership from Indian origin companies.
And we talked earlier about like the importance of leadership, playing a key role in terms of like driving, the change throughout the organization. And you just touched on like, governance at a much even higher level beyond that. I suppose I was curious about just the day-to-day, like, when you get RFPs, when you get like briefs from customers and brands, are you seeing that like kind of the on-the-ground marketer, if I can say it that way, also thinking about it, or is it just actually that consideration is not there. And how do you partner with them as an agency, perhaps to say, actually, let us help you, think about this as we start to build out this response or to build out this campaign?
Look, I think since the DI movement began in the West and now has come to the East, I think what we do see is global RFPs typically do have a part of the conversation they want to have with you on DEI as well as ESG, right? So on both, right? And they do want to see what is the composition of your teams, what are the kind of policies you have, how's the organization run and what's the principles that you follow. And I think, in fact, a couple of recent global RFPs, we've seen that. However, when it comes to RFPs which are India-specific, we're still not seeing that happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a growing economy. There's a lot more focus on bottom line and growth. And like I said earlier, companies and leadership are really focused on that. And choice of partners is currently not put through an evaluation criteria of, let's say, your DEI policy or ESG policies.
Yeah.
So that said, obviously, as a company, we have invested in products to ensure that when we do meet clients who we believe appreciate that kind of approach, we work with, for example, within our core tool called Omni, we have something called a carbon calculator.
Okay.
So for every campaign that you design based on the kind of impressions you're buying and where you're buying them from, it will give you a carbon footprint of the campaign.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we are ready to tackle a lot of the questions.
It's highlighting it, yeah.
Highlighting, but I think, are we seeing a demand from the other side? Not yet.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think there's obviously as an industry, agencies and, brands working side by side to drive the B2B marketing stories, maybe education is an opportunity as well, kind of partnering to collectively come together. Have you seen that focus on education, or is it, as you say, it's there at a leadership level, but it's not weaving itself through?
So I think there is, we do a number of sessions on DEI within our organization for our teams, right? Especially to sensitize people in mid and senior level leadership roles to be much more sensitive towards it. And even in prior organizations that I've worked, we've seen a lot of education happening. I think there was a wave when it was really very active, but you're seeing that waning down in line with priorities of companies. I think we, as a global company, we continue to have significant amount of emphasis on it. So I would say every alternative week, there is some kind of a workshop happening related to either DEI or ESG, which is really, really encouraging. But if I have to look at Indian companies, I do not see that kind of effort being made currently across the board. It'll be wrong to kind of make a sweeping statement. There are many Indian companies which are doing a lot of work in that area, but given the volume of the size of the economy, the number of companies, I think it has a long way to go before it permeates down to a significant part of the industry.
And I suppose one of the challenges, how do you measure efforts that are being made? And so, when you start a journey, you always have to start at a base point and say, okay, how are we moving forward? And so measurement is a key challenge as well, I would imagine, for many brands. In addition to just education and leadership, direction, I think it's also that measurement piece, which is really hard.
To my mind, measurement will follow legislation of some form.
Yes.
Right? Because when you're self-regulating, then I don't know how seriously would an organization really take it.
Yeah.
But I think if there is regulation which happens at the government level to the industry, I think measurement will follow.
Yeah.
Right? I think already, if you look at the ESG space, there are a number of companies and startups in India who are helping companies measure their carbon footprint and reduce their carbon footprint.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing on the ESG side, a lot of efforts and a lot of new companies actually growing. On the DEI side, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be as much.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lack of regulation.
Okay.
Right? And I think if that comes into play, like we're seeing it now on the political side, I think why should it not, to some extent, start applying to the industry? And I think if that happens, I think then you will see measurement following, will be forced to measure, and therefore you will see organizations coming up who will be focused on helping companies measure, get certification, etc.
And a lot more transparency in the organization, in the industry as well.
Yes.
There's so much to this topic, and it's so important. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. It's from a perspective from the region. Appreciate you taking us through that and just kind of sharing how Omnicom is helping to drive this forward.
No, likewise. Lovely having this conversation. I think it's a super important topic, and I just hope that we see a lot more acceleration happening in this space in India.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.